All in all, because all is related to everything else, and everything is part of the all. A weekly space on Oneness Talk Radio to explore topics of interest for our whole being: holism, health and well-being, philosophical questions and ideas for our times, and much more. All in all with Silvana, therapist, holistic health coach, healer, and teacher. Happy New Year to all! Here we are in 2020. Can you believe it? A very interesting year indeed in terms of the energy forecasts, its numerology, and where we're at in the evolution of our world. So for today, I thought I'd share my experience about plant medicine journeys with you. That is my personal and professional experience in relation to what you may be hearing from friends talking about their journeys and from people online giving their perspectives on their experiences with ayahuasca, peyote, etc. So here in Ecuador, I've taught a one-day seminar for about 8 years entitled A Seminar for Foreigners on Plant Medicine Practices in South America, which is part of a series of lectures, workshops, and seminars called Introduction to Shamanism series. I developed this seminar because I saw, and I still very much see, a great need for people to access balanced information about how to safely navigate their decisions about using plant medicine as a healing tool or a tool for consciousness expansion. I noticed that even while living in Canada, but since moving to South America at the end of 2011, I encountered an even more urgent situation. That's because here I began to see firsthand a sort of pilgrimage, let's call it, of North Americans coming down to South America seeking plant medicine experiences. This is a very significant social phenomenon, probably larger than most people realize. In fact, the number of Americans, Canadians, and Europeans coming down to South America specifically for plant medicine cures, journeys, and other experiences has been growing over the last couple of decades. The growth in interest and the mainstreamization of the practice has, of course, caused more and more people down here to offer these experiences, which are now very easy to access. When you search online, for example, you have tons of choices these days, especially in Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, even in Chile, and, of course, in Brazil. Now, Patrick and I met at an ayahuasca circle in Vancouver, BC in 2008. Wow, that's 12 years ago already. I'm saying that to clearly establish the fact that we are no prudes when it comes to plant medicine, and we obviously understand the value of some of those experiences when used as tools for growth. Not as a path, not as a constant go-to that excludes other forms of connection, information gathering, inspiration, and expansion. So back to the ayahuasca circle in Vancouver, it was presided by a shaman from Peru who visited us twice a year. His name is Juan Ruiz, and he is also a trained therapist, a spiritual teacher, and a musicologist. So that was our first introduction to the practice of journeying with ayahuasca, and in retrospect, he was one of the best plant medicine shamans we ever worked with. After 20 plus journeys with that group over several years, we expanded into other circles, sometimes together, sometimes individually, Patrick and I. So I journeyed with a couple of other visiting ayahuasqueros, that is ayahuasca shamans in Canada, and with a couple more in Colombia and a couple more in Ecuador. We also participated in a peyote ceremony when we were in Colombia that was offered by a Mexican shaman, as it's very traditional of Mexico. Then in Colombia, we were introduced to the cactus of the Andes, called huachuma by the indigenous people and San Pedro by the westernized locals. This is due to the association to St. Peter as the one that opens heaven's doors, which this cactus can also do. But anyways, I much prefer its original name of huachuma, which dates back thousands of years in the Andean culture, which extends from Colombia all the way to Argentina and Chile. Shortly after that, when we moved to Ecuador, we encountered huachuma again, especially because it's the main visionary plant of the Andean region where we lived most of the years that we've been down here. So that was a little overview about some of our experiences. But before I go on, I'd like to make an important comment about the fact that most people think about plant medicine journeys in relation to plants that are obviously mind-altering. However, it's important to realize that all plants have profound effects on us. Some are more obvious, some are more subtle, but when we introduce a plant into our system in some way, our being will respond to it in very real ways. There's a biochemical piece and an energetic aspect to it, but all plants have an effect on our physiology and our energetic state. This is true of all other elements in nature too, such as frog medicine, for example. In fact, we've also tried kambo here, which is another indigenous practice original to South America. But that's, of course, not a plant. It's an animal substance. Also very powerful, also very influential for us. That's all to say that whether you are introducing ginger into your system or rosemary, ayahuasca or peyote, there's a lot to consider because the changes they make in our cells when we're exposed to them are very real. And they can have very beneficial effects, of course, but they also should come with some cautions because of their powerful properties. In other words, we have a whole pharmacopoeia of amazing nature elements out there, but we need to educate ourselves to navigate them safely and responsibly. Now, if we focus on the more obviously mind-altering or psychedelic plants, there's additional aspects to pay attention to. And these aspects are biochemical, energetic, environmental, and cultural. I'm going to describe some cautions and precautions here, but know that afterwards I will also highlight the positives, the potential for great benefits that can be accessed from taking plant medicine in a responsible way. So first, let's look at the precautions related to these aspects that I just listed, one at a time. Clearly, the biochemistry of a plant product needs to be understood. Thus, if you're considering trying these plants for the first time, ayahuasca, peyote, huachuma, iboga, psychodelic mushrooms, you should do research on their effects at the biochemical level. That includes the mechanism of delivery, what exactly they alter and how, etc. And this is particularly important if you suffer from any health issues or have a history of, for example, psychiatric disorders such as psychosis. In fact, any responsible establishment that offers plant medicine journeys will do a thorough screening of applicants to decide whether or not it's safe to accept them into the plant medicine journeys. So if you don't receive any questionnaires or are called for an interview, which is even better, that's not actually a good sign in terms of their professionalism. Now, the energetic is perhaps the most important aspect, as we could even say that it's the umbrella of all the other different dimensions that influence them all in some way. And what I mean by energetics is anything and everything that could come in contact with the plant and or with the brew of the plant medicine and be absorbed by them. That will for sure have an effect on its quality, for good or for bad. So the source of the plant, how it was raised, how it was transported, who handled it, who prepared it, how it was stored and kept, what other human energies it was exposed to, and who handles the ceremonial piece are all super important. We've even learned this the hard way, I tell you, by not always being careful enough. Every step is very important and can make a significant difference to the experience and the long-term effect of the plant medicine journey. So to summarize this piece, every step the plant makes from its original state in nature to your body needs to be honored, respected, and surrounded by love and the highest and purest intents. The environmental aspect is actually contained in the energetic, but I'm still going to make a few comments to make it clear that every aspect of the surroundings that one journeys in is also very important. That goes for the actual physical space, which needs to be comfortable, clean, shelter from loud noises, safe from anything that could cause distraction or anxiety, not too hot or too cold, and visually pleasing, as well as having easy access to good water, a bathroom, and even the right foods for when one is coming out of the journey and needs appropriate nourishment. As well as it needs to be an environment that is energetically supportive. That means having only the presence of people who are respectful and knowledgeable about how to behave during a journey. And even that needs to be minimal. Non-interference is key. People who are journeying need to be supported by knowing that there's help and assistance there if needed, but they should not be engaged in conversation or interrupted more than is absolutely necessary. No suggestion should be given by others about anything that's happening, as the journey is or should be strictly personal, and the guidance needs to come from the inside, from the access that the plant medicine gives us to realms of understanding that we may not normally be able to access. Last but not least, ideally the plant medicine should be administered by an experienced supporter trained in shamanism, in energetics, and in plant medicine. This person should know how to protect the space, to keep it energetically clean and keep it sacred. If necessary, this person should know techniques to clear any negative energies and support the person energetically and emotionally. This is very crucial. I have seen everything from very good awareness and skill in protecting the space to absolutely no ceremony, no safeguards, nothing. I even heard a shaman once during a journey admit that he had lost control of the situation. Imagine that. Which brings me to the point that we should know as much as possible about the facilitator before we embark in any journeys presided by him or her. Background, skills, energy, all of that we should pay attention to and find out as much as we can. If possible, we should meet the person even before we make our final decision. And the same for the environment, including the physical environment, where you will spend many hours in very opened up, vulnerable states. Having access to nature in an area that's safe is awesome, but a combination of a sheltered area, like a safe and comfortable room, and some access to nature works the best. Now, the cultural. So most, if not all, human experiences are mediated by culture. Culture is a set of habits and beliefs, perspectives, and ways of seeing the world, and that can influence our approach to anything. Let's not forget that these plant medicines are part of a cultural context that is diametrically opposed in some cases to modern, Western, and Northern culture. So when someone from North America comes down to South America, for example, they have no idea how different the mindset of the people providing the journey or surrounding them during the journey can be. In fact, the people down here may have no clue about how different their guests are either. So both sides may assume that they understand the situation and can handle the situation better than they actually can. Let me give you some examples. Unfortunately, there's very sad reports in the news sometimes, every now and then, about Westerners who came down to South America to partake in some plant medicine ceremony and didn't live to tell the story. It's not that common, but it does happen. So those are the extreme cases, and we usually find out after that the person either had a medical condition already, was in a delicate state of health, or the conditions of the journey did not take into account basic human cares that every Westerner takes for granted, like proper shelter, protection from the elements, or a comfortable temperature so the body doesn't have to deal with extremes while focused on the experience. One also has to be careful that the people around you have healthy, appropriate cultural boundaries. This is especially important for women to feel and be safe from inappropriate sexual conduct, etc. Negative experiences are unfortunately more common than we wish they were. And part of it is cultural. A lot of the Latin American subcultures are very male-oriented, indigenous or not, and what may be acceptable in their midst is not acceptable for others. Sexual or not, other times there's just plain dysfunctional or toxic behavior and energy that needs to be prevented. In my case, after many experiences in a range of contexts, I have come to the conclusion that women should probably journey with a medicine woman presiding over the ceremony. Not just because of the sexual, energetic, and behavioral aspects, but for other energetic and social reasons as well. So that's my preference. When I was practicing as a therapist in Canada, I had a few clients come to me who had just come back from trips to Peru, the Mecca of ayahuasca. And these people were suffering from severe PTSD, confusion, and energetic disturbances. And they were desperately seeking help to try to undo the trauma caused by their imprudent adventures with ayahuasca in a strange environment that was not at all supportive of their growth and healing in some cases. I remember a woman that I had previously known as vibrant, but was unable to function upon her return to Canada from Iquitos, the main city in the Peruvian Amazon, where they offer ayahuasca at every corner, often with very negative side effects. So I've taken you to one end of the spectrum in terms of cautions to think about. Now let's focus on the positives. Of course, the basis of plant medicine journeying is related to the properties that these plant beings have. Let me list some of them that I've noticed very clearly and found to be very beneficial, personally and for others. So these visionary plants have the power to, 1, influence our energy, our consciousness and awareness with their own, which is of course very different from ours. This in itself can give us enormous benefit in terms of expanding our perspective about life, the world, creation, and more. And 2, these types of plants have the property of helping us open up our inner vision by temporarily tearing down a boundary, a protection, you could say, that most people normally have that may insulate them inside their energetic space to a point, but also keeps them limited in their perspective, dampens their psychic or cosmic vision. This field can sometimes be likened to an energetic immune system. And what this means is that when we are influenced by a psychotropic plant, we are much more opened up and therefore more vulnerable to coming into contact with other energies that we may not normally come in contact with. This is why it's so important to keep the space protected. But if the conditions are safe, the journey has the potential of helping us commune with energy, spirits, and beings that may show us very useful perspectives. Or we may get more in touch with parts of ourselves that may be very beneficial to understand and expand on. Or we may suddenly see the perspective of nature beings or of Mother Earth herself, like it happened to me during my last huachuma journey. As a result of these types of experiences, people often feel expanded. And that is the best way I can summarize the common state of being of anyone who's had a positive plant medicine experience. The specific insights or understanding that people get are very, very unique and personal. Whatever one needs to see or receive, one does. But the general sense is that the journey was worth it because it left us holding a bigger, wider, wiser perspective. So again, my recommendation is that you do your homework and prepare well. That includes researching the place where you're journeying, the person presiding over the ceremony, following any dietary recommendations that are required, and especially listening to your inner voice in terms of the right time to do it. Because if you get a message that says no, follow it. And when the time is right, you'll get a clear message that says yes, with no hesitation or doubts. Plant medicine is not for everyone, and that should be followed and respected. It's not a fashion, and it's not a trend that should be followed because others are doing it. That's for sure. From my perspective, it should be used as a tool and not as a path. At least for most people, this is the most balanced and beneficial approach. There are people who are called to do long-term apprenticeships with shamans that specialize in a certain plant medicine, and they of course engage in communion with the plant a lot. But in general, this is not advisable. I've seen people who obviously develop an unhealthy, compulsive, addictive relationship to plant medicine. I see their approach, their motives, their practices, and it's obviously not that healthy because they're not using the plant as a tool, but a crutch, an escape, a new addiction that becomes counterproductive to the liberation that they are trying to gain from opening their perspective and widening their vision. So be mindful of that. Like anything else, being in right relationship is key. And if you are, many blessings on your journeys. Plant medicine has been known to lift depression and heal people from disease such as cancer, not because the plant cured them of the cancer, but because their shift in perspective caused the healing. Big difference. It's also been known to leave people without a doubt that once we transcend our daily 3D world, consciousness goes on. So we know what happens to us in that sense after death. Another one is that this type of experience often helps people reorganize their priorities in life and be crystal clear about what matters most compared to everything else. And that in itself is huge and amazing. And there's many other profound, pivotal experiences that people can have. Now, one last and very important point I'd like to make, and that is that once we've communed with a substance such as a visionary plant, we're forever connected to it. Because this is the case, we can access that energy, that guidance, anytime as much as we want to. We may need to get into a contemplative state, sure, but we do have the capacity to do this. As quantum physics demonstrates, once 2 points in the universe connect, they're forever connected. It's what's known as quantum entanglement. Think about it. Any source that we've ever been connected to personally is forever accessible for us and to us without the need of intaking it over and over again. I am not saying that this isn't a good idea once in a while, as it's obviously a very powerful experience for very real reasons. However, it's important for us to understand this energetic piece well, for energetic and spiritual reasons, don't you think? Imagine having all of these beings, these plant beings that we've been talking about, on our side and at our disposal, in a sense, on a daily basis. Well, we can if we cultivate the connection that we may have made in one or more journeys to begin with, if and when we are called to do that. Of course, there's so much more to be said about plant medicine, so I remind you that I do offer a one-day seminar on this subject, soon to be turned into a webinar. So contact me for information if you like. For now, I wish you a great month ahead. Until next time. Thank you for listening to today's program. I wish you a week ahead filled with blessings for your body, heart, and soul, and hope that you tune into All in All next time. If you're bilingual or learning Spanish, I invite you to stay on and listen to the Spanish version of this episode. Coming up next, ciao!